don't you walk the wheel with us? What is the matter, my American friend? What has upset you? A bad machine doesn't know he's a bad machine. You still don't believe it? You still don't believe you're a bad machine? To know yourself is to know God, my friend. The factory knows, that's why they put you here. You'll see. You'll find out. In time, you'll know.
Oh, I know. I already know. I know that you are a bad machine. That's why the factory keeps you here. Do you know how I know, huh? I know because I'm from the factory. I make the machines.
You're listening to Jim Dynamo's Bad Machine, home of the intellectual smackdown, where thought exists without error and truth knows no compromise. No quarter is asked, and no quarter is given, as the lies that bind us to the bad machine are torn asunder with unassailable fact and unquestionable reason. So put on your thinking caps and strap yourselves in, and stand by for the original man machine, Jim Dynamo.
In your new essays, you state that these various enemies of freedom are pushing us toward a real-life, brave new world, and you say that it's awaiting us just around the corner. First of all, can you detail for us what life in this brave new world which you fear so much, or what life might be like?
Well, to start with, I think this kind of the dictatorship of the future, I think will be very unlike the dictatorships which we've been familiar with in the immediate past. I mean, take another book prophesying the future, which was a very remarkable book, George Orwell's 1984. Well, this book was written at the height of the Stalinist regime and just after the Hitler regime. And there he foresaw a dictatorship using entirely the methods of terror, the methods of physical violence. Now, I think what is going to happen in the future is the dictators will find, as the old saying goes, that you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. But if you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime.
Now, the devices that you were talking about, are there specific devices or methods of communication which diminish our freedoms in addition to overpopulation and over-organization?
Well, there are certainly devices which can be used in this way. I mean, let us take a piece of very recent and very painful history is the propaganda used by Hitler, which was incredibly effective. I mean, what were Hitler's methods? Hitler used terror on the one kind, brute force on one hand, but he also used a very efficient form of propaganda, which he was using every modern device at that time. He didn't have TV, but he had the radio, which he used to the fullest extent, and was able to impose his will on an immense mass of people. I mean, the Germans were highly educated people.
Well, we're aware of all this, but how do you equate Hitler's use of propaganda with the way that propaganda, if you will, is used, let us say, here in the United States? Are you suggesting that there is a parallel?
Needless to say, it's not being used in this way now. But the point is, it seems to me, that there are methods at present available, methods superior in some respects to Hitler's methods, which could be used in a bad situation. I mean, what I feel very strongly is that we mustn't be caught by surprise by our own advancing technology. This has happened again and again in history. With technology has advanced, and this changes social conditions, and suddenly people have found themselves in a situation which they didn't foresee and doing all sorts of things they didn't really want to do. Well, after all, you can read in the trade journals the most political accounts of how necessary it is to get hold of the children, because then they will be loyal brand buyers later on. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, again, you just translate this into political terms. The dictator says they will be loyal ideology buyers when they're grown up.
We hear so much about brainwashing as used by the communists. Do you see any brainwashing other than that which we've just been talking about that is used here in the United States? Other forms of brainwashing?
Not in the form that has been used in China and in Russia, because this is essentially the application of propaganda methods of the most violent kind to individuals. It's not a shotgun method like the advertising method. It's a way of getting hold of the person and playing both on his physiology and his psychology till he really breaks down, and then you can implant a new idea in his head. At present, the television, I think, is being used quite harmlessly. It's being used, I think, I would feel it's being used too much to distract everybody all the time. But I mean, imagine, which must be the situation in all communist countries, where the television, where it exists, is always saying the same thing the whole time, is always driving along. It's not creating a wide front of distraction, it's creating a one-pointed drumming in of a single idea all the time. It's obviously an immensely powerful instrument.
You write about television commercials, not just political commercials, but television commercials as such, and how, as you put it, today's children walk around singing beer commercials and toothpaste commercials, and then you link this phenomenon in some way with the dangers of a dictatorship.
Children are quite clearly much more suggestible than the average grown-up. And again, suppose that for one reason or another all the propaganda was in the hands of one or very few agencies, you would have an extraordinarily powerful force playing on these children, who after all are going to grow up and be adults quite soon.
You've even written about the use of drugs in this life.
Well, now, this is a very interesting subject. I mean, in this book that you mentioned, this book of mine, Brave New World, I postulated a substance called soma, which was a very versatile drug. It would make people feel happy in small doses. It would make them see visions in medium doses, and it would send them to sleep in large doses. Well, I don't think such a drug exists now, nor do I think it will ever exist, but we do have drugs which will do some of these things, and I think it's quite on the cards that we may have drugs which will profoundly change our mental states.
Greetings all. Please be seated and direct your attention to the feeling picture screen in front of you, as you're in for a very special treat today. Our Alpha Plus emotional engineers from the division of propaganda by synthetic voice and music and propaganda by television have put together a most unique presentation on the founding years of our perfectly balanced and stable society that celebrates its 108th year founding anniversary today. As many of you already know, I am Mustafa Mond III, and I am one of the 10 resident world controllers, and I will be your host for this one-of-a-kind presentation. Since ancient times, mankind has sought the perfect balance for his many attempts at creating society. But as we know, the entropic conditions associated with man's passions have created an ever-existing engine of instability. Moral abnormalities created by antisocial groups called families destroyed the cohesion of the well-balanced community. Outlandish concepts like love, hate, courage, and fear, pride and prejudice led to factionalized communities, nation-states, countries, towns, villages that were all so very different that they threatened that which is essential as we all know it without question, production, and consumption. Man, as a biological machine, has specific needs which must be addressed in a systemic fashion, and by addressing those needs with machine efficiency, where none ever want, and one could always have, the demand for production is always preeminent. To achieve this previously unreachable homeostasis, our great founder, Henry T. Ford, designed our society to operate as did his automobile assembly lines, where prototypes to our own hover-tees rolled off conveyor belts 100% functional and ready for immediate use. But to achieve the perfect assembly line detail, the proper tools needed to be in the right place. You could not use a spanner to do the job of a pneumatic press, and vice versa. So the perfect tools needed to be built, perfect people to do their job perfectly. Burdened by pre-industrialized Bronze Age societal constructs, individuals of the past referred to themselves in such vulgar terms as fathers and mothers and families. Others would further degrade society by factionalizing into groups obsessed with mythic and magical beings: Christians, Hebrews, Muslims, Buddhists, and the like. For millennia, these antisocial constructs created the illusion of community and stability. But as you know, the chaos delivered to mankind by his imaginary identity concepts had brought this world to the brink of extinction, as the frighteningly false social identities threatened all production and consumption. Fortunately, our founder, and men like him, worked tirelessly to use these destructive identity groups to destroy each other, where national identities and borders would be smashed and populations redestined through forced immigration. Destroying the homogeneity of racial and national populations would help usher in the new, acceptable identity designed for them by the 20th century's own versions of the College of Emotional Engineering and Propaganda by television. Destroying the hideous family construct would be easy with controlled media presentations that eroded confidence and faith in the previously accepted atomic family structure. Fathers would no longer know best. Alice wouldn't live there anymore. And the only values that were retained old in the family were ignorance and contempt. To further erode the old hierarchies of power, the very differences between individuals would be used to call for a forced equality that everyone knows does not exist. The equal protections all were guaranteed by law would be disingenuously conflated with equal ability and therefore equal responsibility, which millennia of once observable study illustrated quite glaringly. It would be like one of our own engineered epsilons, designed only for menial labor, demanding to be one of the 10 world controllers like myself. A preposterous concept from the start, but a useful means to increase production and consumption, as the millions of mice demanded equal accommodations and resources required by elephants. Societal dissension was increased when these human mice, the live-born deltas and epsilons of their era, were allowed to demand, then be awarded a role in controlling the direction of the human elephants, the titanic movers and builders who once enforced the society standards. Our own College of Emotional Engineering owes its very existence to the psychobabble wordsmiths who created nonsensical terms like racism, or the even more laughable scientific racism, as a means to attack and smear those who would dare point out or question the obvious inconsistencies in the assertions of the faux egalitarianism. With the many unequal classes of individuals now in conflict, who could best command their ship of state, the chaos that ensued was further exploited to destroy all vestiges of the order patriarchal society craved most. Patriarchy required the family structure, an outdated mode where a single male and a single female would bond themselves for life, excluding all other sexual partners, where they would then arrogantly attempt to raise by viparous birth offspring in a manner they believed moral, some by adhering to a local nation-state authority, others as defined by imaginary magical entities fabricated by desert nomads, bereft of all means of sustainable means of production. By removing the patriarch as the crucial part required of the nucleus of this atomic family, the state powers that were precedent to our own were able in a single stroke to subvert the patriarch's authority